Hello, everyone. Welcome to Voices from the Attic, episode 7. This episode is called Jack the Ripper, and as you can see, I have a co-guest with me. We actually do live in the same town, but because of COVID, we can't be in the same place, so this is the next best thing. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, and as the next best thing, I am Lauren's lifelong friend. Give or take a few years. Terry, hi.
So what we're going
Thanks for having me.
Oh, not a problem. Thanks for asking to be on the show and wanting to talk about Jack the Ripper. A very, very spoopy man.
He was.
So what we're going to do is we're going to dive into some history, then we're probably going to dive into maybe some like conspiracies of who it may be and stuff. I know there's a lot of stuff about the royal family and who, you know. Oh, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe to this channel and please do comment below and check out. Is there anything you want to shout out before we begin?
What, that I want to shout out
Yeah, for you, yeah.
Oh, I'm only on TikTok.
He's only on TikTok and he does loads
at the moment.
Yeah, at the moment. And he does loads of sweet videos, so you should check those out. Is it Terry? What's on TikTok, your handle?
Just Terry Pavlou.
Just Terry Pavlou.
Keep it short and sweet.
There you go. And he's doing a sweet business, so yeah. Let's dive into episode 7. Right, so you have a history. Did you want to start sending out the history, or should I've got the history here as well on the script, so
if you want to start, I'll just dive in as and when.
All right, so let's dive into London, Whitechapel, 1888. So Jack the Ripper starts to... So how did it really begin? What was the first one that...
Well, there's a lot of confusion with it because a lot of people think that it started in August, 1888, which you have to picture London in 1888. It's the financial capital of the world. It controls nearly 70% of the world, but you've got this horrible little place called the East End, which I won't flag off too much because your lot are from the East End.
Yeah.
And my lot are from the South End, so that's
there you go.
A bit of war there. But the first victim that they thought they were saying was a woman called Emma Smith. But this was in April 1888. But she was attacked by 3 men. Now, a lot of psychologists, psychiatrists would tell you that a serial killer doesn't kill someone straight away. They start with hurting someone first.
Okay.
It's disputed about the Emma Smith story because it was 3 men. Jack the Ripper, they thought it might be 1 person or 2, never 3, because 3 is difficult to keep under control.
Yeah.
In respect. So that's kind of where the story starts. But for a prostitute to be found dead was not unusual.
Okay.
In Victorian times in London. Well, especially in that part of London anyway. Laugh about it now, but...
I mean... So, I'm trying to think. So, that's very normal. Like, the first thing is, like, what did society view prostitutes as? Was it a lot of... I think it was some businessmen that were acquiring the services of prostitutes. But that was very... I'm trying to work out, was there any brothels around or stuff, or was it just very kind of lucrative and just...
Yeah, no, there was a lot of brothels around. A lot of... they were run by people called madams.
Yeah.
Or pimps. Pimp, obviously, is a word we still use now. Madams we don't use because brothels are illegal.
Yeah.
Brothels were not illegal then because it was a viable trade.
Okay.
And the madams used to pay the police to stay away.
Under the table. Oh, yeah.
Under the table. And, you know, that's just how much history has changed throughout the years, you know.
Yeah.
This wasn't that long ago in retrospect.
So we have here, as I said, so we have the 5 killings altogether.
Yep.
And I think what started to scare the public is Jack would have he would, with each killing, he would make it kind of a spectacle.
It was a showman.
Yes.
In respect.
So when the bodies were found individually in different locations around Whitechapel and stuff, I'm trying to see the other locations here, he would placed them everywhere where people could see these bodies. They weren't like thrown into the docks or anything and never seen again. So it shows here a lot of them were very mutilated.
Yes, yeah.
And each body was done in a specific way and extraordinarily cleanly that it started to horrify people. After the first one, the second one, the third one, there was like a lot of worry because all the things were done so cleanly. The bodies were presented. It seemed like it was becoming a serial killer, someone that is just going around.
Yeah.
So what exactly did he do with the bodies in the gruesome details?
Well, he was the original serial killer.
Yeah.
Which is a horrible sentence to say, but his first victim was a lady called Mary Ann Nichols, and I am reading this off a bit.
Oh, that's fine.
Go
ahead.
I know this, but I am reading.
No, that's fine.
I don't want to get it wrong. Which was August the 31st, 1888, which was the first official killing. Which she was discovered around 4:00 in the morning. She was a prostitute. She was in her mid-30s, 40s years old. And he'd done similar things of all of them, apart from the last person, which we'll get onto later.
Okay.
2 he done in one night, but the first one was a bit kind of crooked. It wasn't perfect the way Jack would have wanted the murder to be.
Okay.
Basically.
So what was crooked about it?
Well, there was no rape to say as that, because it wasn't for sexual gratification. So they think, we don't know for sure, because every detective is obviously dead.
Yeah.
So we can't be sure. But so where I'd say crooked, he was messy with the first one.
Okay.
So history tells us anyway. Where it got later on, he would put the body parts next to the body. The first one was scattered a bit. The belongings were left in the handbag. Things like that, little details, really, which made you think the way they described it, the way he would cut his victims, the body parts he knew. They either thought he was a doctor, a vet, a butcher, something that he knew, because as a normal person, you couldn't go up to someone and do what he'd done.
Yeah.
Basically, I mean, if you really want to, go for it. You will spend your life in prison, but
yeah, don't do that.
But obviously, DNA wasn't really a big thing. Then it was coming into play, but it wasn't there. There wasn't records.
Yeah.
DNA records coming about 10 years after.
Okay.
They started taking fingerprints off all the criminals.
Yeah.
There was a bit of a gap.
And with some of the bodies, so I think, because I know the first time he did it, it seems like the first body, it was like, because it was very scattered and stuff like that, it seems like he was he wanted it to be perfect, but either he was nervous the first time, or he was someone, walked in on it.
I think, personally, we'll never be able to prove it in this respect, but I think the first time, his energy was probably so built up.
Yeah.
And it was probably in such because first you've got to, with prostitutes in those era of time, and it's the same now, but obviously prostitution is illegal, but it's the same now. When you encounter a prostitute, you have to have some communication first.
Yeah.
There's got to be some level of trust in respect. So I know they're just paying for it at the end of the day, but prostitutes still didn't just go randomly with anyone.
Yeah.
If they didn't like the look of the person, they would have just walked away. And bear in mind, these women would have been getting a couple of shillings.
Yeah, each one.
For their time, which a couple of pence to pay their lodging fees for the night if they had to pay for their fees. So they would have gone with sometimes the highest bidder. They said he used to carry grapes.
Yeah, I saw that. He used to carry grapes and stuff.
Because they were a delicacy.
Yeah.
So that would entice them. Grapes and red wine.
So then,
tipsy. But we don't know if there's anything in that red wine because they couldn't take anything out of the body like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So that makes it very difficult in respect to ever know. But I think the first one, yes, he had so much energy, got overexcited and just went
Just
for
a
it.
sloppy job and stuff. I'm trying to work out if this was a younger person, maybe, or an older person, but it seems like they were very experienced, so that might mean middle-aged, maybe.
Yeah, but in those days, to be experienced, say as a doctor,
Yeah.
you had to be born on the right side of the bed.
Yeah.
Basically, you had to be born with a silver spoon in your mouth.
Mm.
You didn't just, if you were from the East End, you weren't going to be a doctor. You may have been a local physician,
Yeah.
but you weren't going to say working Guy's, which was the biggest hospital
That there was, yeah.
in the country at that point.
So it's just trying to, and also because you said the grapes and the red wine, so that would mean this person does have money because they can afford those delicacies easily.
And the carriage.
And the carriage as well. So there was a carriage that was involved.
Because what they say is in every case, apart from one, where the last person was actually murdered in their bedsit, there was not enough blood for them to be killed where they were.
Oh.
Yeah, so they had to get from one point to another point, which is why I personally believe there were two, because you have to have someone to drive the carriage.
So kind of a two-person deal and stuff.
But normally when there's two, one is the rich, wealthy person, one is of lower society who wants to impress that person.
Kind of like the henchman in a sense that kind of was part of it, or maybe got... Because you'd have to give them something. You'd have to maybe give them in response money or something to keep them...
I think money and something to make them feel important.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to be around an important person, even if they're doing this horrible act.
Yes, I'm trying to work out, like, what could you give them? Like, maybe... You said the first victim wasn't raped. Were the other victims raped at all? Did they find out?
No, there was nothing like that on anyone, apparently. There was no touching of sexualness or anything.
Yeah.
They did have their wombs chopped out.
Yeah.
So they had that done. Excuse me, but they had their breast cut.
Like completely, like cut off?
Cut normally under.
Right.
And under again on two cases. And like I say, their womb as well.
Yeah.
Removed. And normally left by the side of their body.
Did he ever take anything that was missing? Was there ever an organ that was missing?
A tongue.
A tongue.
On one person, there's a tongue, and I can reference that if you like.
Yeah, sure.
Sent to a person called George Lusk, who was the head of a vigilante group.
Okay.
So they went out and basically they were like, we're doing the police's work.
Yeah.
For them. And the inspector at the time, Fred Aberline, one of the most famous names in police investigational history ever, he hated these people.
Yeah.
He actually thought that George Lusk might have been the Ripper.
Oh, okay.
Because he was always there.
Conveniently.
Conveniently. But there is another conspiracy, but we'll get to that.
All right, yeah.
But George Lusk received a letter, and they call it the From Hell letter.
Oh,
and
yes.
Sent half of the tongue to George Lusk, sent the other half to the Star, which was the only newspaper at the time. You know, it was a penny a paper, and they loved it because they sold every paper. It was one of the highest selling distributions during that time that they've ever had.
Yeah.
The Star still goes today.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
You know, the oldest newspaper in the country, I believe. And yeah, they sent him the tongue. And that's when the first jokes about being called Jack came up, because the word Jack, like jackknife, jackrabbit, jack of all trades, Jack the Ripper, because he used to rip their skin, is where the name comes from.
There you go. Look at you know the origin.
Yeah, I know a little bit about it.
That's so, like, I'm impressed with all your research.
Well, you know, and I might be wrong on some things because there's so many different ways about it, but you know, I mean, I could read you this letter if you like.
Sure, yeah, let's do some reading of letters.
Right, okay. So this letter was sent to the police.
Okay.
From Jack the Ripper. So it started with Dear Boss. Now, that to me is interesting already, because if you look in today's society, and it's not against anyone at all, but a lot of people call people boss.
Yeah.
All right, boss, how you doing? Things like that. And normally that comes from an old foreign background.
Okay.
very old foreign background, very old, but everyone does it now. But obviously, London in the 1880s was a massive, massive area for Polish, Jewish, German, obviously English as well. Everyone was welcome in London, regardless what your race was.
Yeah.
They wanted everyone because it's a culture that
boost the economy and stuff, and like just get everyone in there.
Even in the poorest parts, which were the most friendliest parts, apart from this bloke, obviously, that had an issue. So he said, "Dear boss, I kept on hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I have laughed when they took so clever and talk about being on the right track." So it's almost like he's got some kind of inside information
that he knows they don't know.
But he's important enough to hear these things. That joke about leather apron gave me a real fix. So the leather apron was a gentleman wore a leather apron.
Okay.
That worked in one of the trades at the time, which was making stuff.
Yeah.
But you had to wear an apron. They found a piece of a leather apron at one of the crime scenes.
Oh, okay.
So they went after this bloke, George Lust, the vigilante.
Yeah.
Went after things with that. So that's where that comes from. I am down on whores and shan't quit ripping till I get buckled. So he's saying, I'm not going to stop till you catch me.
Yeah.
Grand work the last one was. I gave the lady no time to squeal. How can they catch me now? I love my work and want to start again. You will soon hear of me with my funny little games. Sick bloke.
Like...
I saved some paper, red stuff, in a ginger beer bottle over the last job to write with. But it went like thick glue and I can't use it. So he's saying, I tried something with this bottle, but it's not going to work. But I thought I'd let you know anyway.
Yeah, just like this, like he like toying.
He covered this paper in their blood.
Yeah.
And he thought by preserving it in ginger beer, which is acidic, so to get rid of the blood, would have worked. So he's half clever and half annoyed.
Yeah, like common sense wise, which is interesting though, because if he doesn't know that the acidity of ginger beer,
unusual for a doctor.
Yeah.
And then the next goes, red ink is fit enough, I hope. Ha ha. Now, red ink was expensive to acquire.
Yeah.
So that's the next job I should do. I shall clip the ladies' ears off and send them to the police officers just for jolly, wouldn't you? Now, the thing is, that murder had already taken place by this time, and one of her ears was missing. So, keep this letter back till I do a bit more work, then give it straight out. My knife's so nice and sharp, I want to get back to work if I get the chance. Good luck, yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Don't mind me giving the train name. P.S. Wasn't lucky enough to post this before. I got all the red ink. My hands cursed. No luck yet. They say I'm a doctor now. Ha ha. That's also the first usage of ha ha we've ever known.
Yeah.
Written in history.
Oh, really? Oh, that makes sense, like, in, like, history, in sense of, like, the Joker using the red and the ha-ha and stuff is actually a reference to Jack the Ripper, which I never really knew.
I mean, when you think about it, all references back just to this.
Yeah.
To the first person who was just a psycho. Basically.
That's just... So... They still had money because they were acquiring the red ink. They must have known the prostitutes because the prostitutes, you said, would have ran. So this must have been someone that they could...
And, just to interrupt, they could write.
And they could write very well.
Very important, because in them days, the normal people didn't have an education. You were labourers, you were grave diggers, you were all these kind of things, but you weren't intellectual enough to write and read. And obviously, this person... They dispute whether all the letters are real.
Yeah.
But they could write.
Because, like, it could have been a copycat or someone like that. They're trying to... That's the thing, like, the next thing to say about is this someone else that is just doing the letters and trying to be like, this is my work? Or do you think it was actually from Jack himself?
It's difficult. Because I'd like to believe, especially this letter, would have been from Jack, because... time he'd already sent it, he'd sent the letter, killed this poor woman, chopped her ear off, gave it, and that was that.
Yeah. So
and then all of a sudden this ear appears, And everyone's like, oh my God, it says it in the letter.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so there's when that murder happened, there's an interesting story, whether it's true or not, of the time.
Okay.
Was obviously there was lots of conspiracies even at that time going on, like who it be, and the Queen at the time had a sidekick.
Okay.
They used to go and see her, and the police took him in for questioning.
Yeah.
On this one night, because he said that someone tried to run him over because he tried to help with the murders. He tried to help solve the murder, and he said, I could see it. I could see the woman laying there on the table with one shoe on, a feather in her hair. He could tell you where he'd cut, what he'd taken out.
Yeah.
Freaky. Police obviously thought, oh, you're a charlatan, but you work for the Queen. And as everyone knows, Queen Victoria was a bitch, basically, to work for. A fantastic woman, I imagine, but was not easy to work for.
Yeah.
And they questioned him on it and blah, blah. In the end, you know, they took his word for it.
Mm.
And there's a reference in a few films to him. And what he kept saying is, look for the man with the two faces. Now, whether that means he had a split personality or there was two of them.
Yeah.
I totally was born in the wrong time. But
like, that's so look for the man with the two faces. Maybe half of his face might have been disfigured.
Possible, because he would have worn a black, kind of like we have to wear now, mask over his head. He would have worn it all the way here, under his eyes, because how he was described was wearing the deerstalker style hat.
Yeah.
The mask there and full black cloaking. So it is possible that he could have been disfigured.
Yeah. That's crazy. That's like so interesting and stuff. So I didn't say who the victims were, actually, the names. So we had the first one that was Mary Ann Nichols, which was found August the 31st, 1888. Yep. Then we had Annie Chapman, which was found
8th of September.
Yep. And then we had Elizabeth Stride.
Yep.
And then we also have, so there's the same, there was two bodies in September the 30th?
Yeah, Catherine Eddowes and Elizabeth Stride, there were two bodies, but Catherine Eddowes was rushed because they think someone caught onto him.
Mm.
So the police went to one place while he was committing another murder.
Yeah.
And someone walked in him doing it, so he had to run off.
See, at that point you would have thought that he would have stopped because he was getting too close to being caught and stuff, like...
Yeah.
Because you can see, like, the hunger loss was probably getting, doing two murders in one day.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then he does go on to then kill another one, which is his last victim, found November the 9th, 1888, and that's Mary Jane Kelly. And
she's the one I feel most sorry for.
What happened with her?
What he'd done to her was vile.
Yeah.
Like, what he'd done to all of them was vile.
Yeah.
But what he'd done to that poor girl...
What did he do? I need to know these details.
And it's the only one where the photos are not allowed to be released.
Okay.
That's how damaging they were. So there was a conspiracist at the time that thought if you took a picture of your eyes when you die, it would show the last thing you saw.
Yeah.
Well, lucky her eyes were one of the only things left of her body when the police found her. So he took her back to her lodgings at a couple of shillings a night, took Jack back to her lodgings because it was going to be her work, and basically he mutilated her. There were parts of her body on every side of the room. Not as in he chopped her legs off and her limbs, but as in her insides.
Oh, like, yeah.
Yeah. And also it's the only one where he cut up her vagina, basically, as well. The doctors say at the time, most of it was while she was alive. So she would have probably suffered a heart attack.
Yeah.
I imagine. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, so I don't, that's just what I would have thought. And the landlord in the morning went round to collect the rent, knocked on the door, little hole in the window. He moved the curtain back and apparently just ran for his life.
Yeah.
Got the police. They took a picture of her eyes, but it didn't show anything.
Yeah.
You know, and that was the last known murder.
Last known murder.
Yeah. And that poor girl suffered something horrific.
You think it was because his last one he was stopped in the middle, so then his hunger last kind of got extreme.
And whether he knew that was going to be his last one or not.
Yeah.
That might have been it, because a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists say the reason why men would attack women is because of what it reminds them when they're younger. Now, he may have had 5 female influences in his life that he didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to get rid of them, or he could have just hated prostitutes because maybe his mum was a prostitute.
Yeah.
Because that's where it normally stems from.
Yeah, like the root and stuff. Because I was going to ask you what do you think was the motivation but in all of this.
Yes. And I honestly think if he was someone important and rich, he may have not just liked poor people.
Yeah.
And a woman, not now, because women are very different to what they were there, but women were probably a lot easier to kill or attack back then than they are now.
Mm-hmm. Especially prostitutes, because they will be seen as not, you know, they're not going to be seen as, you know, people that are looked down upon in those times.
They weren't worthy enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically, which is horrible. Yeah.
That's great. Like, and there's nothing. I wonder what happened after this last murder. Was there anything after?
Well, apparently, according to a lot of old books and a lot of things, in one book that someone wrote at the time, and it was found years later. Apparently, Fred Aberline wrote in a book, right? And I'd love to get my hands on it. We did know who it was. We knew who Jack the Ripper was.
Oh, okay.
Now, that's why, to me, it's someone important.
Yeah.
Because why would the head of the Whitechapel Police in H Division say, we're not going to arrest someone for this?
Yeah, exactly.
It makes you think.
Well, I was just going to get on to who you think it could really be with all the conspiracies.
Well...
Who's your main suspects in this?
I've got 2.
Okay.
I would think. So at the time, and this is in a lot of films as well and a lot of history books, at the time there was a doctor.
Yeah.
Who worked at Guy's, Sir William Gold.
Okay.
Famous physician. The reason why it's really difficult to say it was him is because he was the Queen's doctor.
Ah, there you go.
So it was difficult. And he had a stroke before this. And strokes then were seen different to what they are now. So his behaviour would have changed dramatically. There wouldn't have been the same medicines, but he would have been looked after because he was a really rich man.
Oh, and the 2 faces. So, like, that might...
But apparently he had a driver who wanted to be a doctor. He may have promised him the world if he'd done this with him.
Yeah.
So that's one of them that I would think, because skilled with a knife, rich, all them kind of things, you know?
Yeah.
And that would have made it difficult in respects. And the second one, I think, may have been George Lusk, the person in charge of the vigilantes, because he was always coincidentally there, directly before the police.
Do you think he'd caused the murders?
Well, part of me does. Part of me is thinking it is. But then, if we knew who it was, it really wouldn't be an exciting subject to talk about.
No, because it's who is Jack the Ripper?
Exactly. And, you know, an article came out the other day, and they were like, we know who Jack the Ripper is. And it was a Polish immigrant called Aaron Kosmisk. I can't pronounce it, so I'm not going to, just in case I insult someone.
Yeah.
And that's who they thought it was. He only appears at the top 10 at number 4 of it could be. So that to me is like, I don't know. Is it easy to blame someone else that's not British and
just easy to put it on them and stuff? I feel like it's very smoke and mirrors and stuff. And I already have so many conspiracies about the royal family and seeing how they operate at times and how stuff is very hush-hush.
Yeah.
That even if it was some estranged nephew that suddenly just had a bloodlust for prostitutes.
Well, Prince Albert Victor did have a bloodlust for prostitutes. The Queen's grandson.
There you go. That was a nice segue. Let's talk about him. Do you know much about him?
Our future King of England, Prince Albert Victor of Clarence, he had a thing for prostitutes and would be often seen in the East End of London. All hush-hush, obviously, you know, but went round in a royal carriage. Now, what's the only thing the police can't stop? A royal carriage. Ever. It wouldn't matter if there was a murder going on inside that carriage. You cannot stop a royal carriage. It's protocol. Same as today, you cannot stop the Queen.
She could just keep going.
She doesn't even have a driving license. So, you know, she could go where she likes.
Oh my God.
But then it was worse in respects of the way they were treated, because now we see the monarch as more of a picture.
Yeah.
Then it was seen as the Queen.
Exactly.
That was it. She ruled. She was in charge. Parliament bowed down to her. Kind of the other way around now. No disrespect to the royal family, because I love the royal family. But I have my kind of.
I should have got you in on the Diana thing, because you would have loved that.
Diana, weirdly, I don't know lots about.
Oh.
I don't know lots about Diana. I know more about before.
Yeah, before.
Before. But Prince Albert Victor, now, he often was perusing around London with prostitutes.
Okay.
In the East End, and also apparently was with a prostitute for a little while, which weirdly was Elizabeth Stride, the Jack Ripper's third victim. Now, did she know too much? Did they all know too much?
Because they would have all been linked as well, because it would have been a very small group of women in that area. They would have known each other.
They all drunk in the same pub.
There you go. They
all drunk in the same. And if you remember, the last time we were in London, we were outside one of them pubs.
I remember.
So
yes, we were.
We were. But they would have been in there. They'd have had their gin, because gin was the cheapest drink.
Yeah.
You know, so that's just the way it would have been.
Has.
And the relationship between a prostitute and the prince of the most powerful country in the world would have had to be hid very, very well.
Exactly, because it would have.
If Victoria knew about it, I think she would have gone into East of London herself and started slapping people.
We'd just go around slapping people.
We are not amused. Although she never actually said we're not amused, by the way. That's
yeah. Well, do you have any final thoughts on Jack then, or do you have any information we don't know about Jack?
Most information is set in stone.
Yeah.
After Jack the Ripper, there was a lot of copycats. Fred Aberline, who was in charge of the case, went over to Scotland Yard.
Yeah.
He's big boss. Not the biggest boss. He weren't commissioner. He never wanted to go that far because he was a drunk.
Yeah.
He got taken over by a bloke called Edmund Reed, who was kind of his assistant-ish. He basically wanted to find Jack forever after.
Mm.
Every time for the next 10 years a murder was committed, he thought it was Jack. But weirdly, Fred didn't. So to me, there's something just not quite
right there. Like either he was it, or like. So what was a last ever? Was there ever a last ever letter to them?
Well, the last letter I apparently, when it all stopped in the last murder in November.
Yeah.
November the 9th, which was Mary Kelly, who was only 25, by the way. You know, we're older than that.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, and then nothing happened until December the 20th, 1888. A woman was strangled.
Okay.
29. I'm reading this here. She had a couple of different alias names, but apparently she was fine. She was fine, and then found in her police cell, and she'd hung herself.
but they don't. They take all knickknacks away in police cells, everything.
Yeah.
They took a woman who had been strangled by the docks to a police cell, and then she was killed. I think she was killed by the police.
Because she knew too much, or she probably saw the face.
Because that was in charge by Robert Anderson. Robert Anderson was really high up in the police at the time.
Yeah.
So, but I don't believe she took her own life.
No.
At all. But then it all stops. Everything stops.
They're so,
Everything.
yeah, they're so suspicious as well. Just like, knew too much.
I mean, there was a murder some years later, well, a couple of years later, well, in 1891,
Okay.
February the 13th, Frances Cole, she was found underneath a railway, which was not Jack style to do it near a railway. It had to be in the city centre.
Yeah.
Had to be in
Where people could see, yeah.
A sailor was arrested about it, called James Thomas. He was acquitted. He was free to go because he didn't kill it. But they don't think it was Jack. And I think it's a mystery that will never be solved.
I think so, yeah.
And part of me, I wish it was solved, because these people didn't have families, though.
Yeah.
These prostitutes have children. None of them had children, to the records.
Yeah.
So there's no lasting bloodline to go, we finally found the person who did it. For the history of the world, yeah, it'd be lovely. But then for the mystery, it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's awesome. Thanks for joining me on today's episode.
Thank you for having me.
And educating me.
Well, just about.
Yeah, just about. I do appreciate it. We might have to, if this works out really well, I can't wait to see what the audio looks like and stuff.
Yeah.
And we'll see how it goes. No. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me. So that was Jack the Ripper, or Who is Jack the Ripper? And I'll let you know when the episode's up. Everyone watching this right now it'll be up on Tuesday. So when they see it, it's Tuesday next week. Yeah, but thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And do you want to say any last words before I close it off?
No, just keep it up.
Yeah, and if you ever want to be on another one, we need to do more of these with conspiracy and stuff, because there's loads of Epstein stuff I wanted to do with maybe a co-host.
Oh, don't get me started on Epstein.
Exactly. So, thanks for joining me, and see you, everybody. Thank you for listening to this podcast.